So we will get underway. We have got a pretty tight schedule. So firstly, welcome to everyone, and particularly good to see Pani here. Welcome. Thank you very much for giving up your time. I know you're busy, so I really appreciate you being here. We are on live stream. We will have Becca coming in via Zoom or Teams. However, the video is still... we're having a few technical issues there, so it'll just be voice only at this stage. So look, purpose of today is to, as part of our water strategy, is to look, it's the first stage of formulating our capital budgets. So we'll work through the capital items that are on our budget. So the Clifton Wastewater Bluff, alternative emergency water, extension of drinking water reticulation, water tower, Bluff water mainline capacity, and then water meters, and we look to be finishing at 12 o'clock. So we've got a pretty full agenda. Those are the major projects we have as Water Committee, and we're really just looking at what's the phasing of those projects, and then what are the high level numbers associated with those projects to feed into our capital budget, but equally long-term plan for council. So that's where we're at. So Rhiannon, do you want to take us through the process and set the scene a bit deeper and further, please?
So I'll just talk briefly about the process at the outset of this workshop, because we are in this transitional phase where the new requirements for under the Water Services Act are coming in. So DIA advice that the outcome of this transition process is what we are following in terms of managing the development of the water service strategy and the water service delivery plan in parallel with the long-term plan. So as we move through each phase, we're trying to keep that work in parallel. The water service strategy and the strategic asset management plans are being developed right now by Stantec as well. So there will be a further workshop on that in the next couple of months, looking into the detail. For today, we're really focused, as the Chair said, on budget elements in order that Council can consider the whole programme together next week. We're looking at the remainder of the strategic projects. The Act is quite clear in terms of how we must manage as an in-house operation alignment with the waters activities. They must not be included within the long-term plan or within the infrastructure strategy, but we must make reference. And so that's also particularly relevant with the financial strategy, because obviously some of the major investments in the strategic projects for water are some of the largest that Council will make. And the auditors will be looking into the assumptions, how we have put together those budgets when they consider the resilience of the whole plan together in terms of fundability. Patricia's looking at me, that's not a word, but you know what I mean, and deliverability as well. So at this point, audit are expecting to do infrastructure assessment around November. But they will be focused on deliverability and the impact on the rest of the plan. They are not yet clear exactly what they will be getting into in terms of details for asset management.
Sorry, Rhiannon, just if you flick back one step. So just to clarify that Council financial and infrastructure strategies must make reference. So that particular areas will be around balance sheet or debt.
It will be around all the things that we normally speak about. So I'll just skip to the next slide, which has some of the detail.
Thank you.
So the key priority areas are around level of service, so required infrastructure investment to maintain services, affordability and financial sustainability, both for rates and debt, deliverability, historic trends, the contractor market, the plans for building that, depreciation funding versus renewal funding versus the asset plans, growth, how we're dealing with that, including household growth and network extension forecasts for industry, asset condition data, the reliability of the data that's underpinning the planning, our strategy versus critical and non-critical assets in the approach for funding and delivering emergency work. That was a big focus last LTP, as ever asset condition data. and our assumptions. So that's our certainty around project scoping and phasing. So a lot of that discussion today will be around that last piece, but those things that the auditors are always looking at and that we are required to balance through the financial and infrastructure strategy, we will still be required to balance. The difference will be that we won't be including the water projects in detail within the infrastructure strategy or within the long-term plan. They will sit within the separate planning documents. Where they will come together is the assumptions and is within the financial strategy in terms of the budgets and the debt headroom and how we are dealing with that, which Patricia's going to speak to more in a moment. So does that help, Chair,
Yes,
in
yeah,
terms
thank
of
you.
that?
Yeah, that's good.
In terms of that detail. So just a reminder of where we're at in the process. The core capital programme has been reviewed, scored, and we have completed the initial smoothing. So you'll recall we had a workshop back in March where we started to talk about some of this, and then ELT came together and did the next stage in May before we had further discussions around to other types of asset classes, property, roading, etc. Just a reminder that as a whole programme, and remember this is a very unnuanced, very high-level thing, but the whole programme together is still not deliverable at this phase. Obviously, every asset class is different. There are different contractors working on it, so that is a more nuanced discussion. But at this point, we are still sitting with the programme as a whole, not fully deliverable, and we will need to be working further on that on the 30th of June and beyond. So next week we will work on the non-water strategic projects and continue with that prioritisation that we started back in May. And so that's on all of the items that are both in the roadmap. They are major projects that Council has discussed and requested further since then. And we will be applying the same lens of what is required to be delivered as a result of legal compliance, health and safety, core asset condition requirements versus what are level of service discussions where Council has a little bit more room to move in terms of the projects all being very valuable, but there being some greater flexibility over whether they actually need to happen or whether we want them to happen. 4th of August, Stantec will present their work on the water services strategy and the strategic asset plan. We may also have some further updates around OPEX from the water services programme as a whole. In August and September, we will bring papers to the water committees and to Council. So a reminder that these workshops are for information and discussion, obviously not for decision making. So after each step in the process, we'll bring further papers forward. So I'll touch briefly on capital delivery and then I'm going to pass to Patricia to speak about the budget elements. So one of the big areas of focus within the whole programme, and in fact in previous LTPs where the greatest tension has been in terms of our ability to set the plan, has not been actually our ability to raise the funds. Council is in a strong financial position, but our ability to get the work out of the door and delivered by the existing contractor market. And so capital delivery remains a significant constraint for this long-term plan and water service delivery plan. Previously, in previous long-term plans, how we have dealt with this is using a delivery factor. So essentially the program that the teams put up in terms of what needs to be delivered, we apply a percentage across the top of it. And so that percentage has ranged between 80 and 95% in terms of that's the amount that gets budgeted based on what the teams together think is deliverable. That chart that's on the screen is the actual delivery rates in the water, sewerage and stormwater programs from the 2021 year through to 24-25. So you can see that's against the 100% of the plan, and we would have been funding around 85% of that. So you can see where over time the focus of the team has been on building project management, building data, building the investment in our engineering in order to make sure that we're actually closer to delivering to the plan. And that's been the area and focus of ELT over this planning cycle now, is how can we get to a more accurate delivery forecast. So at this point, our intention is to move from delivery factors to full funding of budgets based on the best known information, recognising that as we move through the remainder of the budgeting process from now through until November, ahead of audit and consultation, so obviously everything keeps moving and can keep moving until 1st or 30th of June when we adopt next year, we intend to move to that 100%, but that may change through the audit and budgeting process. So with that, Patricia.
Yes, yep. Hey, Campbell.
Just so that I understand, if you go back another slide, and it might be explained by the slide that we use. So yesterday, where's the number? Yesterday we approved a budget of 80 million for capital expenditure for next year. How does that link to the 101 million that it shows up there?
Year one is year one of the long-term plan, which is the following financial year.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 27, 28.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And obviously that is just a place marker of where we're at as of May. Things are still moving.
Okay, so really complicated graphs these. So basically the one on the left, as you're looking at it, is showing what the capital program profile is looking like going forward from 2028 through to 2038. And that's across the whole council based on what we've initially got at the moment. The red line shows the 10-year average, so we're sitting at just under 90 million a year. That is a pretty standard sort of fall away come 2035, which you tend to find in an LTP. I would expect that to come back up as we get through the rest of asset planning and asset management plans. We've coloured them based on non-waters and waters because as a ring-fenced unit of council, we need to have a look at the total capital for water and non-water together because that's how our funding is worked through. And the one on the right looks at where we are sitting. So the pink line being a net debt, forecasted net debt balance. The red line is the LGFA cap, and the black line is the ICC cap, noting that we've always had a differential between the LGFA cap and ourselves, recognising we have the ICHL uncalled capital, and a little bit for in case there's an emergency and we need to borrow more. Now, those councillors that were here last time, members will know that in the last LTP, we adjusted the black line to make room for Clifton and Bluff. And that's where you see it slightly going up because we've got it up to 200, then it was to drop down. Based on putting this line over the current proposed capital program, we're going to have to change the black line again as part of the financial strategy so that we don't have net debt going above the line. That would be a breach. So, but because it's our choice, we're still below the LGFA 280% cap of revenue. So just don't panic about the black line being too low at the moment because that's something we have control over.
Alex.
From 33, the trajectory of that goes up. Is that making an assumption that, because it's based on revenue, is that making an assumption that our revenue is growing?
Yes.
What are those assumptions of revenue growth based on?
Those are probably still sitting on 1% growth, which was our LTP assumption from last time. That is the numbers that we are still waiting on. We are reviewing that assumption at present, so that may not be as low as that going forward.
And I'll just note this slide is showing the program based on the rephasing that you'll see today, but it has Clifton funded at the current level. So the next chart is a position move.
So this next chart shows Clifton based at the new average indicative budget, which we'll discuss this morning, which is significantly more than what we had in the last LTP, which does now challenge the LGFA 280% limit on our first look. So we got these numbers yesterday. So the team have quickly put them into the model without us having a look at how we may look, what's the revenue assumptions, and because we haven't looked at our growth assumption yet, we know that we have a challenge sitting when based on these numbers, and notice we're still sitting further out. It's just for a 3-year period. We have been talking with LGFA, so they have been given an early heads up because we needed to clarify that as a ring-fenced entity we were still sitting on 280%, which they did confirm, which was what we thought was the case because I knew that would be asked. So we have the potential to go for, we have options under the LGFA agreements if we were to hit that.
Questions? Mayor Campbell?
To some extent, it may have been overtaken by the last chart, but the chart before that showed the capital required as being over $100 million for the next, however many years. Given that we've identified that our ability to spend is limited to about 80, not because we choose not to spend it, because there just is not the engineering capacity to do it. How are these two things going to be rationalised? Are we going to cut a suit to suit our cloth and bring it down to 80, or do we believe that we can find, additional suppliers that can take it up to that level? Because if we cannot, then I don't know why we would plan to
That's right.
spend at that level.
So, Matt, do you want to take that one?
Through yourself, Chair, in response to Tom's question, that exact challenge has been presented to us. We understand that within the organisation, within the entity. We have got the wheels in motion now where we're trying to resolve some of those constraints and limitations within the market. So we are working through that space diligently at the moment. And we have some objectives that we are actually crossing through to try and close that gap up.
By that,
Yeah, capacity.
to be able to service.
That is correct.
Michael?
Just two parts for council to think about or the committee to think about in relation to that is some of those projects are bespoke projects that will require outside construction anyway from that perspective, so we've got to take that into account. And the other thing to take into account is when you're looking at the projects that are sitting in that capital program portfolio in relation to the water services, there is a component in there that is assumption around growth that is not reflected on the chart on the right at the moment, which indicates that we will have to make some alterations when you look at the next chart when it breaches, because we'll have to actually consider that growth, and if we're planning for the projects for growth, then we need to consider what that actually means on a revenue side. So that's the challenge we have right now, and it's a challenge we're working through to what assumptions we need to bring back to the council table.
Lee?
Yeah, sorry, question and a statement probably, but question is historically, I wasn't here, but the ability for us to deliver to the market, have we identified whether that's purely a market issue or it's a capacity issue of ours, and because there's two elements in there. And I guess secondly, if we do have a sense of that, we're, I know we're working on the market, but are we comfortable that we're gearing up, setting up the business unit well enough capacity-wise to deliver that ourselves? We're not the bottleneck, I suppose. Yeah.
Through yourself, Chair, I guess as we're going through an organisational change within getting the water service entity stood up, we're looking at that in-house on how we're best fit to deliver and meet the aspirations of our program and the expectation of the public. So yes, that piece is going on. Concurrently, I guess, in succession, I guess, we need to recognise as an organisation the days of our historical suppliers flooding in to seek work is gone. The market has shifted down here. We have seen that and identified that, and I guess we need to be really, not creative, but very aware of the operating market. Everyone is competing for good people, so we're very, very aware of that and have the desire to grow and diversify the market to service not only us but all of the Southern region.
Yeah. And, you know, we've, at governance level, we've got to keep an eye on our capability. Yeah.
Sorry, through yourself, Chair, just want to add to that. The other thing for context is from a capital delivery perspective and capacity of the organisation, if you look back at our previous spend across our portfolios, we've almost tripled our delivery capability within the organisation. I don't mean staffing wise, I actually mean in our capacity to deliver the outcomes. So we're on a path of growth to be able to achieve those outcomes, but we're starting to tap out just at the moment in relation to that. So we will need to look at another push shortly to get to those levels, but we are at about 3 times what we previously were.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. It's just good context for me. So, cheers.
So this last chart just shows what would happen if you rephased some of that Clifton work out further. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. So last slide for me before I hand to talk to about Clifton. Just a reminder, when we're talking about some of these big projects that have got consenting processes, as well as when we get to detailed engineering, like the budgets keep moving. This is the reality of this kind of work that's technically complex and has lots of different factors going on. We are in a 3-year budgeting cycle, as we always are. That remains and continues under the Water Service Strategy and Water Service Delivery Plan. What we need to do through this process is, with the best information that we have available at this point in time, to put in place budget placeholders. It is not the same as the consenting process and the detailed design process, which by necessity are happening obviously on different timeframes. As we move through, the budgets will need to get updated. We always hope, don't we, Patricia, that these might happen in great alignment and we might move smoothly through the process. And that I think that hope is often disrupted, often by NZTA in terms of the roading programme. But this by necessity, like this consent being up in 2029 and with WEPs only having just landed, this is a moving feast. So that will be my last point I'll just make as we move into now discussing the projects in detail. This moving feast is more than normal. The uncertainty remains high. The auditors are still uncertain about exactly what they will be looking at. They're still waiting for the detailed guidance from the legislative change. This will continue to move right through the next a year. So what we are considering today is what are the best budget positions we can put in place in terms of the information that we have available, what's going to be the most defensible to audit, and we need to improve our understanding of the likely impact on debt headroom and availability of funding for other projects, recognising that, again, that also has a lot of uncertainty in it as the teams firm up the financial modelling as well. So with that, Matt.
Oh, yeah, we're on to Clifton. Is there any questions on any of the slides we've just seen before we move into the Clifton piece? Okay, no.
Sorry, I do have a question. It relates back to something that Patricia said 5 minutes ago, which was that we are talking to LGFA about the almost goes without saying that I think our objective should be stay within that cap. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
we need to look at that
Yeah.
spend profile
100%.
and say, I mean, to just increase the cap, I think, and you know, I think for security reasons, I understand why finance is going to be looking at that possibility. Absolutely, but I mean, I don't think that should be our objective.
What, the water services? Or
Well, both. I mean, most of it's going to be driven by water services.
yeah. Mm. Yeah, Yeah, I agree. The sort of however piece is, for the purpose of what we're here for, which is LTP and audit. It's prudent to reach out to see what the tolerance is at that level, because they're our lender, aren't they?
Through your chair, yeah. We have to give them the heads up. It's also critical for credit rating as well. So now that we know we've got a number, they have to put a couple of sort of trains underway.
Yeah, well, it's a very recent number. There's a lot of detail we've got to get through to see how that's constructed and where it sits and all that sort of good stuff. So, okay, let's get on with it. Yeah, yep. Raria, do you want to come up and sit at the table as well and just be part of our discussion? And thank you for coming along. So Russell's going to take us through this, and you've got some handouts coming around.
Matt will take us through the first 3 slides. When we get to the detailed stuff, we've got a principal engineer from Beckers in the water field that will be zooming in or teamsing in from Christchurch, and he'll take us through the options that you'll see in the slideshow. So Matt, if you want to take that through.
Thanks, Russell. So I guess the point for elected members to be aware of, obviously Clifton is one of the most significant projects that we're transitioning through to understand in regards to what next steps looks like, in particular regards to WEPS and the likely consent conditions that will be applied within the WEPS framework, on the pretense of also understanding what a most effective, financially effective option looks like. So we are working today with the latest numbers that we have to work with, based out of advice from the latest information within industry. So I'd also like to, I guess, obtain a statement from Te Ao Marama. So Lydia, thank you for sitting at the table today and give some perspective to your thoughts or expectation of Clifton.
So, do you want to do that? Yeah. Do you want to outline that now? Yeah.
Morena, I suppose without going too far into it, I did discuss this with Matt. Te Ao Marama would be requesting a cultural impact assessment be done on this project to provide you with a full and clear understanding of the cultural impact of the area. But I will note that any option that remains as is, a status quo option, would be met with objection from Mana Whenua right across the board. And based on what occurred in the Bluff options, there was a rabbit hole that I went down in terms of...
I'm sorry, could I ask you to speak into the mic a little bit more? I'm
sorry.
struggling to hear you.
Based on what occurred with Bluff, with it being a status quo option that was chosen in the end, I did start going down that rabbit hole of researching the impacts of a status quo or similar option in the Clifton program. And it is not just Mana Whenua that recognises the significant impact that the Clifton wastewater treatment plant discharge has had on that estuary. And there are a lot of studies to support that. And the estuary itself, excuse me, was a significant mahinga kai space for Mana Whenua down here. So that the destruction of the Oriti estuary is in violation of Te Tiriti, where we are guaranteed our ability to practice mahinga kai. I think that's a good enough statement.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want to?
Thank you.
we like to go to the next slide. Michelle, can you see if you can get Greg on the system, please? So just to set the scene, Clifton Wastewater Treatment Plant is 11 Lake Street. We generate waste from the city. It is currently discharged to the estuary. Thank you. And the current consent runs out in 2029. Again, we've engaged some consultants to help us with this really high level LTP planning costs. This doesn't include cultural or affordability issues at this stage. What the consultants went through, they determined where we could discharge under the WEP standards, which have been stated before that they are relatively new, and we are basically working on those standards. So the wastewater treatment plant, for a consent, if it was approved, no matter where it goes, is for 35 years. Our consultants have indicated from our growth policy that the consent would be for 35 years, and we would have a consent out to 2061, and our population is predicted to rise to 78 to 91 1,000 cubic metres of flow per day, based on those population figures.
What's our current flow, Russ?
Current flow is around, now this is
Roughly.
is probably about 53, something
Okay.
like that. Our base flow is around 22, 25. But as we've talked about on the Water Committee, it changes based on infiltration. So, do we have Greg on the system anywhere yet?
Keep rolling then. He's not on.
He's not on.
No. He's not joined yet. Which says we're going good for time, Russell.
Sorry?
It says we're going good for time.
Yeah. Can I make a call for a minute, please? Good morning. Are you on the system? Unfortunately, Greg's had a Windows update and he's going through a shutdown process. So he's at 91% at the moment. He's hoping to be on very shortly. So if we could just have a wee staging approach.
Through yourself, Chair, we'll recommend reconvening the Clifton update and sliding over to Bluff Wastewater, just to keep the program moving, please.
Yep, let's do that.
Can I ask a question on the previous slide then, before we move on? The
Yep.
slide prior to that?
Yep. Do you just want to flick back one slide, Russell? That one?
Back one.
Go back one more. That.
Sorry, carry on. I'll ask it later we'll get back to it.
Okay.
I was going to go, yeah.
Okay, good morning.
Hi, Alistair. Welcome, Vaughan.
Yeah, thank you. So I thought we'd just do a wee recap on Bluff around the recent history. As you're all aware, the new Water Services Act was introduced at the end of last year. A part of that was the existing consent for Bluff has been extended to August 2028, which gives us a timeline. And the process that we're working through now is determining what is going to be our preferred and complying option. We are in a new regulatory environment, and the investment decision will be different. So I've asked Vaughan just to run through that in a summary form now for you.
Yeah, by way of introduction, Vaughan Crowther from Utility. I'm engaged by Invercargill City Council to assist in the development of the business case for Bluff and also Clifton. I'm aware I presented this to the committee in April, but for those who were not there, what we're trying to show here is broadly this new environment whereby our investment decision is somewhat, what would you say, sandwiched between two requirements, the floor being these National Wastewater Environmental Performance Standards. The new aspect here, not a new concept, but now regulated, is the ceiling of investment. So that's looking at the costs and cost effectiveness, impact on ratepayers and consumers. Under the Water Services Act, effectively Three Waters is to be treated as a monopoly asset, therefore it now becomes under regulation in the Commerce Commission. So you're now in an environment of price regulation. So that's just a recap of where we got to in April. If there's any questions on that, let me know. So just if we go to the next slide, please. Yeah. What does that mean in terms of this process today? Essentially means we need to obviously understand any option and if it can achieve resource consent in terms of this gateway process. And the other criteria we need to think about is its costs across the entire term of that consent, so 35 years, not just capital but operational and maintenance costs. How does it impact affordability to the community against what was committed to in water service delivery plans, but that's the realm of the Commerce Commission, and also the sustainability of the entity, and that's more around balance sheet risk, so debt. Those are the key criteria that we'd look at for all options, and then additional considerations being obviously deliverability, like we just touched on. Can we actually do this in terms of complexity, market capacity, remaining consenting risks that we need to factor in, and obviously broader long-term challenges like climate resilience. So those things will be included in the consideration of options.
In presenting the budget to the committee, we've proposed a budgeting envelope, and it's sort of bounded by two options. Both options that we've put forward rely on the fact that we will achieve a high energy coastal discharge, which we think is a likely outcome, and we'll be able to achieve that compliance for both the options that we're putting forward. The difference between the two options is going to be the regional plans requirement for considering cultural requirements. And option A says that we either get to agreement when we don't need it, or it's not required, and therefore there will be effectively our status quo option will remain. There'll be very little capital expenditure. And the second option, the cultural requirements will deem that we'll need to put in a land contact option. And the option that we've based that budget on is what we worked through in our previous application with iwi. And that option was still in progress at the time, but we came up with an surface overland, wetland and pump station option. And we've utilised that budget and obviously brought the costs forward to when we think it's going to go in, of 6.8 million.
So on the OPEX, is that an increase in OPEX by 210,000, or is it just that's what the OPEX is?
That's what the OPEX is.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So the OPEX on the other one is missing, so there's no cost to run it.
that won't be, it must have an operational
Must
cost.
have OPEX.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it should have the 210 on both sides.
Well, no, I'm surmising there'll be an OPEX difference in the two models. Is that a reasonable
Yeah, no,
assumption?
I'll need to clarify that. Brussels just clarified that OPEX is additional to the current, and that's there to run, mainly to run the pump station.
Mr. Chair, can I ask why option B is called high energy coastal with cultural requirement?
So part of the consenting process is to consider the cultural requirements. If we are to consider that, and it does require an overland wetland, then that's what that is describing.
So is that talking to if Environment Southland applied some additional requirements? Is that where that
Refers to the other requirements. In the Act.
Under the Act. Yeah. So it's addressing the other requirements under the Act. Yeah. It's possibly not worded correctly.
Yeah, I just know that the
Yeah.
name of that could be taken
Yeah.
in a very different way.
Yeah, that's right.
Misunderstood.
Misunderstood totally,
Yeah.
because it's
So,
not just
yeah, points
cultural.
taken.
Thank you.
requirements.
Yeah, noted.
Yeah. Mayor Campbell?
So just to clarify, am I right in understanding that we are required to assume the lowest cost option, in fact to use the lowest cost option in our consent application unless we argue differently? So the default position, as I understood it, is that we must put in the lowest cost option. Would that be the case?
Well, that's probably a
No.
Vaughan question, yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, not necessarily, no. That previous slide is, we must first get consent. Then, of those options that give us consent, what is the most cost-effective or I guess lowest whole-of-life cost to do that? So, of those two options that were presented, there's two consenting pathways. So we're keeping it open. So essentially, it's not the lowest cost. It is the option that provides us the consent. And then of those, what is the lowest cost or most affordable of that time? So it's a combination of those two criteria.
I
Does
must
that
have
make sense?
misunderstood. I thought we were being guided to put in the lowest cost option unless we could justify doing something else.
Lowest cost that gets us a consent. So
Yeah,
those
so
two
which
combined.
I assume is, which I understood was, provided it achieved the WEP standard.
Well, correct. However, the current situation is it's not that black and white from a regulatory perspective still, and so the conversations are still ongoing whereby we can comply with WEPs, but we may not comply with other aspects of the legislation. So that's what's still ongoing.
Yeah, so my understanding is that we could propose a model that would comply with WEPs, and then EES, as the regulator, could come in and apply additional requirements to, and it's quite loose, that timeframe, but I think it is effectively, the wording is additional requirements, isn't it? And so then that would have an impact on what and that's subject to them issuing the consent, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so we put up a model, they say, well, we want you to do A, B and C in addition to that, or add to that, and we will issue consent on that basis, is how I understand the current legislation flows through, which isn't what was proposed originally, but it is what we've got at the moment.
3 South Chair, jumping here just to support Vaughan. So Environment Southland have considerations surrounding the coastal plan.
Yes.
So the coastal plan looks at other obligations contrary to WEPs. So yes, we may conform under this option with WEPs. It could very well be contradictory to conforming with the coastal plan.
So does the wetland assist the coastal plan achievement?
I'm not aware of that position being made clear by Environment Southland. unless the team is telling me otherwise.
No, we don't have clarity on that.
Is there any way that a wetland could assist the coastal plan?
Well, yes, we believe so, but we need to go through the process.
So, yeah, so as we work through the consenting process, we're joined at the hip with the regulator around, is this going to fit the bill, isn't it? We're not just going to put a thing in cold and then no or yes.
Yeah, we've already started those
Yeah,
conversations with Environment Southland. So we're trying to get a common understanding on what's going to be required.
And just for me to confirm, I guess, in layman's terms, there is a pathway forward for us to be able to be compliant while still honouring Te Tiriti and our mana whenua voice within this.
Yes, we believe so.
Okay.
I think we're all on the same page there around the best environmental standards. Don't see that anyone wants any different.
So I'm sorry, through the chair. I'm just assuming that we're just really talking about status quo and 1F.
Pretty much.
Thank you.
That's 1F, yeah.
Well, we know that the
A decline
Hang
letter.
on. Yep.
A
Right.
decline letter was provided to council, or Alistair and Matt, both of them, on behalf of Awaroa last year, and I resupplied that last week. And it is very clear in our opposition and our intentions moving forward, should council move forward with status quo.
Sorry, just question around the status quo option that we were looking at. It was basically a status quo on steroids to the point where it has a diffuser attached to the end, isn't it? Wasn't that the intent, that we were going to disperse the water further out with the diffuser or in different directions with the diffuser? Sorry, looking at the end here as well.
Yeah, it was a enhanced status quo.
Enhanced status quo rather than just completely as is.
Yeah, if you were going to use status quo, we would have to put a diffuser on. It wouldn't mean that we would be extending the pipeline any further. Status quo would be discharging the effluent at the same point and putting a diffuser on the end of it. So it is just a device that changes the direction.
Thank you.
Okay. Keep going.
Matt, did you want to add anything further so we can move on to the alternate water supply?
Yeah,
Or do you want to go back to Clifton?
Have we got our man on? Is Greg on? No, yeah, so let's go to alternative water. Sorry, Mayor Campbell, did you
Can I
want
ask
to? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Can I, and I'm asking us so that I understand options. Am I right in thinking that a diffuser can be a rock tumble?
Sorry, no.
Am I right in thinking that a diffuser can be a rock tumble? It can be essentially a mixing process as it passes over rocks.
At the moment, under the WEP standard, there's no definition of what a diffuser looks like. It's part of the engineering decisions. The air diffuser at the present location would be a T section which would distribute the water both ways.
Have other councils used rock tumbles as diffusers?
I'm unaware of that.
Okay. Yeah, I thought they had. I mean, the purpose of the question, I mean, let me be clear. When we discussed this before, there was an option which was not supported by EB, but there was an option of a rock tumble because it made contact with it. It's still capital investment, but you avoid $250,000 a year in operating costs, which is quite significant. And I mean, I would ask whether that is absolutely ruled out as a part of this, if we could put a diffuser in. Because I remember in a previous discussion, it was mentioned that a rock tumble can be used to diffuse, because a diffuser is just something that mixes it. Right? Right.
Yeah, just just for clarity, a diffuser is the ability to mix it, so you get good mixing in the ocean environment, so it's part of the discharge. The cultural requirement or the land contact requirement is in addition to that. And it's a process by which we work through with the area around how we best put that land contact in place.
Certainly is the case for you, Chair, that rock tumbles have been used elsewhere in the country to provide that contact with earth.
Yeah, I think Dunedin they use one, don't they?
And it's very significantly cheaper than a wetland, and it's got no maintenance cost.
I can answer that question now. It would not be considered appropriate land contact, and the one in Dunedin that you are referring to was very loudly objected by Te Runanga or Otako. We're in complete opposition of that, and the city decided to move forward with it. Example, yeah, it would not satisfy. Anyway, the purpose of, and I did touch on this throughout this whole process, the purpose of the land contact is taking the wastewater from Tapu to Noa. Must pass through Papatuanuku. Rock tumble is not her.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have to do a bit of thinking around this. Okay, so Greg is available. So so next steps on the Bluff project, Alistair?
We need to complete the investigations to be able to put our application together, and there's technical and obviously planning work to do around that. We're expecting that to take into next year to get all that completed, and then we'll be hopefully in a position to make our application.
So when would you expect / hope to be putting our application in?
At the moment, I'm targeting the middle of next year.
Right. Okay. So we've got some time to work through sort of how we meet all the requirements. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair, just on that, as we're talking about next steps for Bluff, I think, and just referencing your point, do we have an opportunity to sit with our mana whenua partner and really engage? Like, I'll be honest, like, I understand there's an objection here. I also have an understanding of where that principle and those objections, I guess, come from a Te Ao Māori.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, in navigating and moving forward in this decision, I don't believe I'm informed enough for whether we have taken the time to sit in a space together and truly hear and truly listen and understand what is really at play here outside of slide decks and reports as they come through. And so as we move forward in next steps, I would certainly advocate and so request that, I guess.
The reason why we went for an extension to our consent was because the regs were changing, right? And,
100%,
and we're still not 100% clear on those. We've got a lot more clarity than we did have when we made that decision, right? So I absolutely agree. The thing I want everyone to remember is that, we're all on the same page around the best environmental outcomes here, right? So that's where it starts and finishes. And so we just got to your point, we've got to keep working hard to understand the different perspectives and different potential options, solutions to get the best environmental outcomes here that are affordable. And we've just got to keep those tenants and keep working through it. And that's what we will do.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just reinforced that we're saying the same thing, I think, because I think regardless, Bluff aside, any treated wastewater discharge, project, Clifton, Bluff, we absolutely need to understand that, and we've got to be fully engaged early. So I agree, and I think we all want to achieve that. Yeah.
Okay, so we will go back to Clifton. So Greg, I think you're online. Welcome.
Sorry through the Chair. I'm happy to recirculate some of the papers that came from Bluff, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, I think what we'll do is we'll sort of have a bit of a hui and work out a workshop or get together and just, yeah, get it sorted. Welcome, Greg.
Good morning.
So yeah, okay, let's get on to Clifton. Russell.
So just to recap, because we're engaged to give us some direction on costings only for different options to comply to the WEP standards. Like I said before, this did not include cultural aspects or affordability aspects. It was just basically a cost to discharge at different locations based on the WEP standards. So they have looked at a land discharge options under the WEPs and 3 water options. So on the screen you've got Greg Officer, who is the Senior Principal Water for Beckers, and Katie, and I can't remember what Katie's title is. If you can just take those through. Greg, if you just want to tell me when to move the slides, that'd be great. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And first of all, apologies. I had a software compulsory update at 9:30, so anyway, we're back online now. My apologies for that. So
Wait, can
yes,
you can you speak up? You're pretty hard to hear.
Hello, can you hear me? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
Okay. Right, well, thank you, and look for the opportunity to present this optioneering work for the WEPS regulation of assessment for the Clifton wastewater scheme. So Katie and I are going to talk you through the work that we've done and the overview of the cost estimates that are associated with those options. Katie, well, I can't actually see which slide we're on, unfortunately, on my screen. So
I've moved you to the proposed land at Sandy Point, the first slide.
Okay, right. Well, the first slide is talking about disposal at Sandy Point. So we've looked at disposal options to water and also disposal options to land. Let's start with the disposal to land. So we've identified an area which we call Site 7. And this site was identified in previous work about a year ago, where there was some high level assessment of potential irrigable land sites within proximity, probably 15 or 20 kilometres of Invercargill, so a pretty extensive area. This site was identified as preferred for a number of reasons, and so we've adopted that and said, well, okay, if we were to utilise that site, what would the scheme look like? What engineering requirements would have to be satisfied, and what would the WEPS rules say about it? Am I making sense so far?
Yep.
Good. So there are some particular things about this site. It is a low-lying sand dune area. It's very extensive, and it sits behind a reedy beach. It's got shallow groundwater. It has a whole lot of existing activities down there. There is some identified wetlands. There's extensive areas of indigenous biodiversity which would need to be avoided. There are some water bores. So I guess as an overview, while there's an opportunity, because the land is very large, there are also quite a few constraints. So Russell, could you move to slide 4?
Yep.
Okay, so how this works is we have the new WEPS regulations. They were gazetted just before Christmas 2025, and there is a section in there which provides a process for making an evaluation for a given site and a given activity, and working through that process, what we arrive at is a land class for that particular application site. As part of that, there is essentially a matrix, and in the matrix we have got site categories and we have got risk categories. So there's a process which is clearly laid down, which we have run through to identify what would be the applicable site category and what would be the risk category for this site. The site category is really talking about what are the key features of the land there that make it more or less suitable. So that's about the drainage, it's about soil suitability, it's about the depth to the groundwater, and also takes into account land slope. The risk category is really talking about the risks beyond the boundary of the site. In other words, if we were to apply wastewater onto that land and the wastewater percolated through the ground or overland, I suppose, beyond the boundary, what would be the risk in the receiving environment? And that's talking about nutrient risks, risks to public health beyond the site, For example, if there was shellfish gathering and the groundwater migrated to that locality, would there be pathogen risk or public health risks to people gathering those shellfish? So we've run through that process, and where we've ended up with at that site is that it would be land class 3 or land class 4. Now you can see in that table that there are some green boxes and some red boxes. The green boxes are land class 1, that is generally more favourable, and the red boxes are land class 4, which is generally unfavourable. So we're right on the edge of very unfavourable or slightly or moderately favourable. Okay, so can you move to the next slide, please, Russell, slide 5.
Done.
Cool. Right, so where we've ended up with this site, it's either land class 3 or 4. If it is land class 4, then the application is non-compliant with the WEPS. That means the WEPS does not apply, and that is because the risk is considered to be too high. And the key driver at this site is that the groundwater is very shallow. And that coupled with the fact that when we put a lot of wastewater on, the groundwater levels will rise. So there's a risk with a large-scale application of wastewater on a site like this that the groundwater will approach the land surface, and that is considered to be adverse, and hence there's a risk that the WEPS would not apply. If you look at that figure, you can see there are extensive areas of red. The red areas are what we have described as land class 4, and really we're saying we can't apply wastewater onto that land in a way that would comply. Then we've got exclusion zones, which have to do with wetlands and biodiversity areas, and what we're left with is some fairly small and distinct orange zones, grey zones to the north, which are either land class 2 or land class 3. So a fairly broad extent of that site would not be suitable. Are there any questions at this point, or shall we move on?
Yeah, there is. Greg Lee.
Sorry, Greg, Lee Babe speaking. Just from a naive question, is there any mitigations pre this? I understand the groundwater issue, but are there any mitigations that could be held potentially to make this a viable option? Right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So one potential mitigation would be to irrigate the water over a much larger area, because then the impact on the groundwater mounting would be a lot less. But then we might be talking about 1,000 hectares. So the scale of the problem, you're talking about buying a very large area of land, and it becomes uneconomic, quite frankly. So the approach we've taken is we've used the WEPS rules, and the WEPS rule is 6 metres depth of wastewater per year to comply with the standards. We've said, okay, that's compliant. We're putting on 6 metres of wastewater. How much groundwater mounting are we going to get? And then we've made the assessment on that basis. So there's no sort of easy way around it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
What other land areas that were taken into consideration?
Yeah, excellent question. I'd have to go back to the work that was done in 2025, but there were a number of other sites. Some of them were on the southeast side of the estuary down towards Bluff. There were some zones there. There were some other zones further inland, but to be honest, I haven't got that picture in front of me. So a lot of the issues with the other ones were that they were either too steep, or the soils were unsuitable, or they were too small discrete areas that weren't large enough.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Martua Mike.
Sorry, just
Speak into your speaker, please. Yes, microphone, thanks.
forgive my ignorance in this, and I may be a wee bit behind the times. Site 7 you arrived at as being preferred. How did that reach that conclusion?
Yeah, that hasn't been a topic of this work we've done this year. That was really a decision that was made based on the work last year. And the reason was it was an extensive area, an area that was certainly large enough, or considered large enough, and because it's sand, the infiltration is pretty good. So basically we can make the water go into the ground, and the area is very large. Those are probably the two key factors.
Other sites didn't measure up in the same way? Or?
Well, because we're talking about a very large volume of wastewater, which is up to 1,000 litres per second, you know, add that up over a day, and it's a huge volume of water. So it is unusual in New Zealand to apply water at that scale onto land. Normally a wastewater land to land application, to take Akaroa as an example, You know, it's a tiny amount, so it's like I think it's 60 litres a second at Akaroa compared, this is 1,000. So, you know, we need an enormous area of land, and that's the fundamental problem with trying to find a suitable site for an application at this scale.
Alex?
Probably a silly question, but the majority of that land is reserve land. Are there any restrictions regarding that?
Yeah, so we've tried to take that into account. You can see on that map where we have excluded zones that are identified with special status, including identified wetlands, which would have status under the RMA, and also the biodiversity zones, which would also have status. So we've just taken those zones as excluded. But your question is a good one, because it's quite possible there are other areas of biodiversity or significant ecological features in a broader extent across that site that we are not aware of at the moment, which could then emerge later and be difficult to deal with.
Yeah, sorry, follow-up question from that. And on the map, there's the clearly defined bores that would render the bore water from a water table practically useless, wouldn't it? Because that would have the risk of pathogens, etc. So they'd have no water access out around the Sandy Point area.
Yeah, so we've made a 250 metre exclusion zone around those groundwater bores, which I think is probably that may well already be reflected in a public health water supply management plan or an exclusion zone, which is common with regional councils to have a formal exclusion zone. But either which way, you're quite right, there are risks, and you might have to deal with those by providing potable water to substitute for groundwater for those users.
Thank you.
It's another complication. Yeah.
Okay, Mayor Campbell?
Would it also exclude the use of that land for recreation? Given that, you know, this is an area that is heavily used for recreation at the moment by citizens of Invercargill?
Not necessarily. So you have at Rotorua, there's an extensive area of land irrigation there that's been running for 30 years, and I know that's currently looking to close it down, but there's also an extensive mountain biking and public use of that area. In the case of Akaroa, there is a biodiversity area of 40 hectares in size, which is going to have biking trails and hiking trails through it. So that all depends on how the wastewater is applied, and the wastewater can be applied in a way that does not prevent public access.
Greg, and I appreciate there may not be an answer to this, but if that volume, and I think you said 1,000 a day,
Litres per second.
Litres per second, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big amount of water.
If that was significantly reduced, would that change how this option was assessed?
Yeah, it's a great question. The smaller the amount, the easier it gets, and we know that there are issues with infiltration and flow in the Invercargill network because it's low lying. So if you could reduce it down, the problem gets easier to solve. But even if you could reduce it down by 10 or 20%, you're still talking about a very large volume of water. So it won't solve it, but it will make the problem slightly easier to solve.
So again, a sort of a hypothetical question: to what level does the volume have to reduce to make this or other sites that were looked at more viable? Are we able to look through that at some stage?
We certainly could. I mean, we've done a study. I keep on talking about Akaroa. So the council up here spent 5 years trying to reduce the inflow and infiltration in the Akaroa wastewater network, and they've spent $5 million on it, and the net reduction is a few percent. So I guess I'm coming at it from the point of view of an engineer and understanding how very difficult it is to reduce those high flows which are influenced by rainfall and groundwater. So, but if you could reduce it by, say, 10%, then you'd probably reduce the land area by 10%. So you'd still need 110 hectares of land, which is a large area.
Yeah. And is that a sort of how watertight, excuse the pun, clean water, is that ratio, so, 10% reduction in the volume, 10% reduction in the land area, is that a linear relationship or is that unknown?
Well, we've just used the WEPS regulations, which say 6 metres a year. So what we'd have to do is figure out what the net reduction is, because you've got your dry weather flow, which is the wastewater coming from the community, which isn't going to change.
Yeah.
And then you've got, when it rains, you've got extra water coming in. So you'd have to do a calculation to say what the net overall reduction is, and then say, well, how does that add up in terms of my 6 metres per year and how much land? So it might not be directly linear, but it won't be far off.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it. It's a very hypothetical question, but appreciate your insights. Okay, any questions on that option before we go to the next one? Okay, let's roll to the next one.
I've moved to the water disposal sheet. Greg.
Okay, thank you, Russell. So we're on slide 6, which is headed proposed disposal to water options.
Yeah.
So we have looked at essentially 3 areas for disposal to water. We've got the estuary, so we're going to talk about options there. We've got Arete Beach, we can talk about options there, and we have also got Steep Head, which is on the south side of the estuary. So that figure shows the Clifton Wastewater Treatment Plant. It shows some outfalls, which are ocean outfalls or estuary outfalls in red, and then it shows orange lines connecting them up. So the orange lines are wastewater pipelines, and we've shown multiple routes to get from the treatment plant to the location of the outfall. The reason we've done that is that we don't know at the moment which is the cheapest option, the cheapest way to get there, because there might be several different ways. So we've really had to look at that and say, well, okay, we could do a landline route, or we could put a pipeline through the estuary and then have an outfall. So that's why this figure is a bit complicated, and there's a few different pipelines going sort of here, there, and everywhere, or as it would appear. I guess so that's the setting. Those are the options we've looked at. So we've got an outfall in the middle of the estuary. We've got an outfall at the mouth of the estuary. We are not showing an outfall at the treatment plant. In other words, we're not showing the existing outfall, and I'll get onto this shortly, the reason being that it doesn't comply. And so then we've got 2 options at Arete Beach, and we've got 1 option at Steep Head. So that's what we're going to be talking about next. Are there any questions on that slide?
Yes, yeah.
Just for clarification, the New River Estuary mouth outfall, the shortest route you would think would be straight across the estuary, but you've chosen to go around the estuary. Is it because it's so much more expensive to run a pipe through the estuary, or?
Yeah, excellent question. We have not priced this option because there's just too many to price. And I think our initial view is that would probably be the most expensive option overall, and I can explain why that would be a bit later on. The thing is that putting pipelines in the marine zone can be higher cost per metre than running them over land, or if it's running around the edge of an estuary, it might actually be cheaper. So there's a difference in the price per metre of pipe, depending on the route. And for this one, I've just arbitrarily said, well, we'll run the pipeline around there. But in any case, we have not priced this option.
I'm sorry,
but we could do.
On the same matter, at the outfall, it looks as though the pipe extends into about the middle of the channel, which would imply you could just as easily do it from the south side as the north side, which is a much shorter pipe. Just looking at that. So, if you look at the pipe which...
Are you talking about the estuary one, Tom?
The estuary one. So the same one I asked about before, where it's gone all the way around.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why it never went across. But if you look at the pipe that heads out towards Bluff...
so the Steep Head open ocean outfall one, yeah.
I mean, you could simply intersect that one part way around and run it into the middle of the New River Estuary, just the same. So I'm just wondering why you never looked at that one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, as I said, we haven't priced the estuary mouth outfall because we think it's going to be the most expensive. And the reason for that is it'll require a high level of treatment and also a high reticulation cost. So our default option in the estuary is the mid-estuary outfall, which is the one I've labelled New River Estuary Outfall. So I can explain the logic of that route if you like. I don't want to get sort of too hung up on the estuary mouth option for the reason that, first of all, we haven't priced it, and secondly, we think it's going to be the most expensive. But we could look at that if that was something you really wanted. We could go
Just
away
to clarify,
and
just to
work on
clarify what I'm asking though, because I would like to see it. At the moment, you've got that New River Estuary mouth outfall running out to the estuary and ending at about the midpoint of the estuary, coming from the north. You could do exactly the same thing coming from the south.
Excellent point.
Which would
taken.
avoid you running all the way around.
Well, you're probably right. Like I said, we haven't priced the new estuary mouth one. We can certainly go and do that. We haven't done it yet. And then when we come to do it, we'll obviously look at the cheapest and quickest way to get there.
Estuary mouth outfall. Right, okay, I see the one you're talking about. You haven't costed that one. Yeah, right.
No, that's the one option we haven't costed.
Yeah, right. Okay. Alex.
Quick question around the
Yep.
treatment standards itself. So kind of disregarding where the pipe eventuates, obviously they need to be in different places for different for different standards. Given that you've got, your high energy coastal, estuary outfall, etc., which one of the options actually gives us the highest treatment quality, as in so even if we are discharging to estuary, has to be far higher treatment standards because it's low energy, lower energy water.
Less dilution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it has the ability to stagnate a little bit more. It's not as free flowing, etc. It's not going to move around. So does that mean with the mid one, New River Estuary Outfall, I guess that one there, because it is close to the treatment plant and it also discharges into the estuary, that's the one that would have to come out with the highest treatment standard from the processing standpoint or the treatment standpoint?
Can I suggest that we run through the slide pack? Because the slide pack explains all of that.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Is
Good
that
question.
okay? So if we go to the next slide, and quite rightly, as you say, so slide 7, which is called WEPS dilution compliance status.
You're on it now.
Yeah, good. Just to address your point, you're absolutely right. So what we're trying to do here is match up a dilution performance with a treatment requirement. And the WEPS clearly lays out that if we have a discharge to an estuary where the dilution will be comparatively poor, we will need to have a much higher standard of treatment. So yes, that's a key theme, which I'm hoping we can explain how we've approached that issue. Let's start by talking about dilution. So in the WEPS, the rules say that for different disposal locations, a different level of dilution is required. So for the estuary, the minimum dilution is 20:1. So that means for 1 litre of wastewater, we have to achieve 20 litres of diluted water within a distance of 100 metres from the outfall. So for the existing discharge, that cannot be satisfied. So that will get struck out. That will not be feasible to continue discharging with the current tidal discharge arrangement without an outfall pipe, just through an outflow channel for, in order to meet the WEPS. Then we've got the other 2 estuary outfall options where we're still looking for the 20:1. We have done some dilution modelling, and the dilution modelling results are uncertain. So for a midpoint outfall, which is the one shown in that picture, which I'm going to show you again in a moment, we had dilutions of 1 to 15 to 1 to 40. If it's 1 to 15, it's not good enough. If it's 1 to 40, it is good enough. At the estuary mouth, we've got 19:1 to 45:1. The issue in the estuary is the hydrodynamics of it are extremely complex. We've got tidal inflows and outflows. We've got different levels of tide on different tide cycles. And because the estuary is shallow, that has an impact on the dilution. We've got tidal movements. Our model is fairly simplistic and it doesn't allow for the complex hydrodynamics. So what we're saying is it's possible that the estuary discharge could comply, but we can't say that for sure. If the council wishes to pursue that option further, we would have to do a hydrodynamic study of the harbour water movements, and that requires specialist modelling. So Watercare is doing this work at the moment for their outfalls to identify whether, for example, the Manukau treatment plant could continue to discharge into the Manukau Harbour and under what circumstances. What we've done is we have run a few scenarios. We've pushed the pipe right out to the middle of the estuary because there the water is deepest. Now, the deeper the water, the better, because what happens when the plume leaves the diffuser is it's buoyant because it's fresh water and it rushes up towards the surface. So the deeper the water, the more efficient the mixing is in that initial zone before it hits the sea surface. So the reason why we've put that mid-estuary outfall right out into the middle is because the water depth there at high tide is 4 metres, whereas closer to the shore, it's only 2 metres. So the dilution we get with 2 metres water depth is minimal, but at 4 metres, it's a whole lot better. So in a nutshell, what we're saying is the estuary discharge may be feasible. It looks quite promising. We can't categorically say yes. We'd have to run a hydrodynamic model, and it could be done. But to come back to your point about the treatment, we'll move on to that. So is there anything? Well, let me just talk about the other outfall options. So we've got options at Arete Beach and options at Steep Head. For all of those, we are getting much higher dilution. Steep Head is the best. That's a minimum of 200 to 1. So by the time the plume reaches the sea surface, it's diluted to 200. So that means 1 litre of wastewater and 200 litres of seawater. Now the benefit of high dilution is that the zone of non-compliance or the zone of potential impact is dramatically reduced. And for that reason, the treatment standard for a long outfall or a mid-length outfall is much lower. So this will play out in the costs, which we'll see shortly, because for the estuary discharge will require a higher level of treatment. And for the open ocean or mid-length outfall, it'll require a lower level of treatment. Are there any questions on that slide before we go to the next one?
Just so that I can absolutely discard it in my mind, if I look at the existing discharge estuary where it's red, are you saying that irrespective of the level of treatment, it would be impossible to reach a standard that would satisfy the WEPS? So the WEPS is an absolute 20-to-1 dilution, irrespective, even if it was clean water, it would still be a 20-to-1 dilution.
Correct. You have to meet the dilution standard and you have to meet the treatment standard. And you did not meet the dilution standard.
Thank you.
So irrespective of the treatment standard, as the Mayor said, so if it gets to level of processing so it's clean water, drinkable, it still has to meet that dilution standard.
Correct. The rules are the rules. Of course, to treat to drinking water standard would be enormously costly. So I'm not sure that we're identifying an easy way through this as an alternative.
Okay, next slide. We just want to keep on time, so we've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay, well, let's try and get through. So the next slide is about the treatment standards. Have you got that one up on screen, Russell?
Yep, I have.
Yeah, great. So you can see there, on the right-hand column, there is a list of numbers, and those are the current quality results for the Clifton treatment plant. And then we've got the standards and the WEPS for estuary, high energy coastal and open ocean. Now you can see there are some red boxes there. And what that's showing is that for a discharge to the estuary, under the WEPS, your current treatment plant does not comply. So the ammonia is 42 and needs to be reduced to 15. And the total nitrogen is 36 and needs to be reduced to 10. So there's a big step change in the quality of the discharge needed to meet the WEPS standard for the estuary. Similarly for high energy coastal, but you can see there's only one parameter where we do not comply, and that's ammonia, and the number we have to get to is 35 and we're at 42. So, we're not far away. There's a small improvement needed. There's a net reduction in ammonia, but apart from that, we're largely compliant. And then for the open ocean, it's a good news story because it's green from top to bottom. In other words, the current quality complies across the board in terms of those defined parameters. There is a fishhook though. The fishhook is that the WEPS requires a QMRA if the discharge occurs within 4 kilometres of a shellfish gathering area. Now, because it is known that there are tauaroa on the Reti Beach, and I don't know the detail of the estuary, but we have assumed for all scenarios that there's a possibility of shellfish gathering within 4 kilometres. Because of that, there is a requirement to do a QMRA, which stands for Quantitative Microbial Risk Assessment, which is a computer model which assesses the fate of viruses which are discharged from a diffuser in the environment, how long they spend in the environment, where they end up, what the concentration is. Our view is that if a QMA was to be done, and it will need to be done, it is very likely to show there is a high risk of infection of shellfish beds due to viruses. And that is because we have done similar modelling of a number of other sites around the country, and viruses are very persistent and they exist in communities, and the normal parameter used in New Zealand is norovirus. So we have assumed that for all cases there will be a need to get 3 log removals of norovirus, and that means that even for the open ocean there will still be a need to bolt on some additional treatment steps to achieve that.
May I ask a question?
Now, can I suggest, given you could ask the question, I'm just
my question is whether so we've got a capital cost estimate summary chart that's already been provided to us. Is that pathogen treatment included in those costs, or is that in additional to those costs?
It's included.
It's included. Thank you.
Right, should we run through the estuaries because we're only at slide 8 and we've got about another 8 or 9 slides to go.
You're on the outfall one, estuary outfall.
Yeah, let's talk about the estuary outfall. Yeah. Katie, do you want to talk about the treatment required for that option?
Great. So for this option, we've talked about needing a higher level of treatment, and for what is the existing process, that reduction in total nitrogen, those 2 red boxes in that column, or the total nitrogen box, essentially requires a new plant or new part of the plant, an activated sludge plant, and that involves a bioreactor. So that's to provide a nitrification step and a denitrification step, and you need both of those to remove the total nitrogen, reduce the total nitrogen concentration. So we've put together an idea of the sizing and what that could look like on the existing site. It would involve no longer using the clarifiers that you have kind of towards the south of the site. It would involve one new clarifier, and then when you see the box that says DAF, that's a filtration step that enables good disinfection through the UV step. So it's the UV that we need to reduce the viruses, but to do that well, you need to have clearer water, so you need to do a filtration step before that. And then we're showing a pump station heading, it would head out to whatever the outfall option is there. With this step, you wouldn't use the maturation pond or the wetlands any longer with this plant. So it's like a whole new secondary, tertiary treatment process on the plant.
That all of those lagoons would be retired.
Speak into it.
Sorry, so just to clarify, all of that land use at the moment that is currently being used as the lagoons, would that all be retired? Yes. And reclaimed?
So the sludge lagoons to the left, some of that might still be required, but the wetlands and the ponds would be decommissioned, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Should we go to the next slide?
Thank you.
Yep, slides up.
Okay, so we talked about the treatment for the estuary outfall. Now we talk about the practicalities of the outfall itself. So there will be a pipeline coming down on the edge of the estuary, and then a pipeline or an outfall pipeline running out to the centre. And as I said before, we've put it out to the middle because that is the maximum depth. And at the maximum depth, we will get the most efficient mixing, and there's a pretty strong probability we would get a tick, we would be able to comply with the 20-to-1 based on the numbers we've got so far, which is just our screening model, really. So we're talking about a new, very sophisticated, very costly treatment plant to meet that standard. And we're talking about a relatively short, relatively cheap conveyance system consisting of a pipeline and an outfall. The risks are that because we know in the estuary we are still going to have comparatively poor mixing compared to an ocean outfall, there will still be risks to the environment and potentially to public health. And there obviously may be cultural issues or cultural values that are going to be impacted on. We haven't talked about that. So, you know, you're still discharging treated wastewater, it's still got contaminants in it, and it's still going into a confined lagoon area where it's going to wash around up and down for a number of tidal cycles before it gets washed out to sea. Even though it discharges officially on a tidal cycle, it will not simply all be immediately flushed out to sea. So there will still be some risks to the environment from that. The overall capital cost for that scheme option at the moment is $244 million.
Move to the next slide.
Should we move to the next slide? Okay, Katie,
Slides
do you
up.
want to talk? Yeah, so now we're talking about Arete Beach. We've got two options here, mid-length outfall, long outfall, and Katie's just going to tell you about the treatment upgrade needed for that scheme.
Right. So this is essentially the high energy coastal discharge category. When we talk about the mid-length outfall, that's the treatment standard that needs to be met. So the red box there was around ammonia reduction. So that's just a nitrification step, whereas the previous, the estuary, required the denitrification as well. When it's the nitrification step, it can be achieved by more of a modification to the existing plant. So that would be replacing the trickling filters with larger ones. At the moment, they're quite highly loaded, and so ammonia reduction through the plant's quite minimal. Bigger ones could achieve ammonia reduction. So, you know, a process that's already used on the site. It would require an additional clarifier. The pond and wetland process would be maintained, and the disinfection step would still be required. So we've included that DAF and UV unit as well, and that just gives an idea of how those things could fit onto the site.
You just go back to the previous slide, please. One back. Okay, yep. No, go
Previous treatment, yep.
Yep, so go forward again. So the bioreactor is a significant cost to option the mid-estuary piece.
Correct.
Yeah. It's providing a high level of nutrient removal. Yeah.
And that's driven by the need to get down to total nitrogen of 10, which is actually a pretty low level.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question. If we were to experience rapid growth as a city, which of the treatment plants would be most appropriate for heavier loads, I guess?
Very good question. So what we've done is we have adopted a design horizon, and we've said 35 years because we're saying under the WEPS rules we can get a consent for 35 years. So we've projected out based on the demographic data from Invercargill to the population of 2061, and we've taken the median number, which I think is 75,000, and we have designed the entire scheme to cope with that flow and load. And this is one of the reasons why the number this year is a lot more expensive than the number last year. So if the number ended up being a lot higher than that, then whatever schemes have the most complex treatment will have a greatest impact, because the cost per volume of per cubic metre of water is the highest. Whichever schemes have the lowest treatment have the least impact. So, for example, an ocean outfall is probably going to end up having less impact as long as we can fit the water down the pipe. In other words, if we can manage the usage of water per capita effectively and keep a lid on I&I, the impact on the scheme overall for higher growth was probably going to be less for an ocean outfall. Does that answer the question?
So the less treatment, the more infrastructure scalability, the higher the
Yeah.
treatment, the higher the cost, the less scalability. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, basically that's right. It's easier to pump more water down a pipe than it is to treat every litre of that water.
And the,
In a nutshell.
the assumption there, Greg, is the same mix of what we're receiving, i.e. with the growth, is it proportional to trade versus residential, or is it, yeah?
Yeah, there was a number of different scenarios put up. We just adopted the median. So I guess if you had more granularity around those projections around trade waste or industrial growth, then we could sort of factor that in. But higher industrial growth is going to put more load on the treatment facilities, and it's going to increase the costs disproportionately.
Yeah, that's right. Versus residential.
Yeah, versus residential.
Okay, cool. Righto. Right.
Given that we are likely to receive a large influx of industrial waste, given that we have an industrial zone that's pretty much going to happen, how does that affect all of these options? Because it is likely that we are going to receive a lot more heavy industrial waste.
Russell?
Through the chair, if the development proceeds, we will put conditions on what sort of loadings we will get there. So those high risk ones, we will put a trade waste consent requirements on those. So we don't see that the loadings will increase that much because they'll have to do on site before we receive it.
Yeah, and also user pays. So the rate pay won't be picking up for industrial. Yeah. Okay, next one.
So you're on the mid-length slide now, Greg.
Okay, mid-length outfall.
Yep.
Right, so we've got two outfalls at Ariki Beach. We've got a long one, 2 kilometres long, and we've got a mid-length one, which is 1,100 metres. So Katie's already talked about the treatment upgrade. We need new trickling filters, which are larger. But apart from that, we can keep a fair amount of the existing treatment assets, which is beneficial. There's a very long pipeline. We've got two pipeline routes. You'll see from I can explain how we've costed them in a moment. The key point here is about the Ariki Beach outfall. Where does it go? How long is it? What are the impacts? So we have chosen a site to the north of the Ariki Beach village. And the reason for that is that the bathymetry, or the depth of water at the southern end, is very, very shallow for a long way out to sea, well over 1 kilometre. Now, the problem with that is that the surf zone will be very, very long and it'll extend for a long way offshore. We cannot practically build an outfall and maintain and access an outfall diffuser if it is sitting in the surf zone. That's just not suitable. It can be done, but it's ill-advised and there's a lot of risk. So that's one of the reasons why we have pushed it further to the north. The reason is that the water gets deeper more quickly as you move offshore at that location. The other factor is that we don't want to have an outfall directly at a community because there's a social impact with that. There's a loss of well-being. The community is going to think they'll be stigmatised. So it's just not appropriate to put an outfall right there, and that's how we've chosen that site. So that's that site. We've figured out how long it would need to be to get the minimum number of dilutions and to get just beyond the wave zone, and we think that length is about 1,100 metres. So that's where the 1,100 metres comes from. So we've got a major or maybe a moderate treatment upgrade and an 1,100 metre outfall that complies with what we call the high energy coastal standards. That is a level of standard in the WEPs. The benefits of that is we're going to get pretty good dilution. We get the discharge well away from the shoreline, which is going to effectively reduce environmental and public health impacts to a low level. The risks with that option are it's still possibly at the back of the surf zone, so there might be some issues we need to figure out there. The cost is 261 million, and that is an average of the pipe route cost. So we've costed both of those pipeline routes, and we're talking about 15 kilometres of 1 metre diameter pipeline, so it's a big pipe, and the costs are substantial. And we've just taken the average for the time being because we didn't want to. There are some fairly small differences, but we would have to do more work. I mean, I suppose the key objective over time is to identify a preferred disposal route overall And then further work could be done to refine the costs and the pipeline routes to make sure that it all makes sense and to demonstrate that it's the most cost-effective whole of life as required under the Water Services Act. Any questions on that one?
No, keep moving.
You're on the steep head one, treatments?
Yeah. Back to you,
So
Katie.
the treatment upgrades for the Oredi Beach long outfall and the steep head outfall are the same because they both meet the open ocean dilution requirements in the standards. And that is essentially maintaining the existing plant as it is and adding on this disinfection step and the filtration required for it. So yeah, the DEF unit and the UV unit are what would be needed to add to the treatment process. That one's a bit more straightforward.
Okay, no questions. Next one.
You're on the long outfall now, Greg.
Great, okay. So now we have a long outfall, and the reason why it's long is it's going to get to a depth where we can have 100-to-1 dilution minimum, so it will meet the open ocean standard. The open ocean treatment standard is much more relaxed than the other standards. Katie's already talked about what we would have to do. It's a fairly simple bolt-on of some disinfection, but no other improvements to the treatment plant. So there's a benefit in reduced extent of upgrade to the treatment plant, and we've got the outfall. 2,000 metres long is it's fairly conventional length for an ocean outfall for this type of activity. Christchurch outfall is 3 kilometres long. How long for Hastings is 1,500. So there's plenty of outfalls about this length, plus or minus 500 metres around New Zealand, and the documented performance of them is very, very good. So we might actually get 150 dilutions to 1, which means we get very efficient dilution and dispersion within a short zone around the outfall diffuser. So that's a key benefit. This is probably almost as good as it gets in terms of minimising environmental public health risks, minimising risks to the shellfish beds, minimising social impacts, lower cost of treatment. So those are the key benefits. I mean, if there is a downside here, probably these schemes which have long pipelines will have higher pumping costs because you've got to force that water down 15 kilometres of pipeline and then through an ocean outfall. So there's a running cost associated with making it work, which is unavoidable. That comes down to electricity. The total cost, $247 million, with an average, taken as an average of pipe routes.
Yeah, Campbell.
Shall we move to the next?
Got a question here, Greg, sorry.
I just noticed that
no, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was asking a question. I just noticed that the long outfall in terms of capital is cheaper than the shorter outfall. So one is, the long one's 2,000, the one's 1,100. Logically you would think that the 1,100 one would be cheaper. So I presume the work that's required at Clifton is less in the long one.
Yeah.
So
that's absolutely right.
I mean, I've assumed that, but my question really is a little bit different because I think when we look at these options, we actually need to look at them on a sort of net present value basis. We need to look at what the operating costs are going to be as well, because the less you have at Clifton, I would suspect, the lower your operating costs are going to be, albeit there's electricity costs and pumping and so forth. But I mean, I think, to get a full picture of what the actual cost of each of them is, you need to take into account operating costs.
Yeah, it's an excellent point.
But we won't have done that yet, eh?
No.
Oh, sorry, Pani.
Through to you, just a question, because I've just been sitting here listening. Because of the longer pipeline is going further out into the ocean, which dilutes everything, why haven't we ever considered the Backer Bluff, the extension of that? Because literally we're talking the same type of issues around viruses, the impact on our kaimoana.
So you're talking for the Bluff one?
So I'm just looking why we're going further this way, but we're not looking at further in the pipeline on the other side.
So, I think we'll it's a question possibly when we go to have that hui with the Bluff one, we can pose there, but let's stay on this one just for the purpose of time, but it's a fair question. Yep, keep going.
Okay, should we talk about Steep Head?
Yes, you're on the slide.
Yeah.
Great. So we've got outfall options on the north side of the estuary mouth, and we've also, for comparison purposes, identified an option on the south side. So that's called Steep Head. So that would involve quite a long pipeline from the treatment plant running down along the edge of the estuary, or alternatively running over land. We've identified 2 routes, and we've costed both of those routes. The land side route is quite a lot longer, so there is a bit more difference in the reticulation cost. And then we've got an outfall at Steep Head. So Steep Head is a whole different kettle of fish. The depth of the water, it drops off a lot more steeply there. So we can have a shorter outfall, and it will be at 19 metres of water depth. So it's a bit like the Moa Point outfall, I suppose, which is very, very deep and gets, or when it's functioning properly, gets an exceptionally good dilution and dispersion. So
wasn't a great choice, Greg.
Yeah, that wasn't a very good choice here. My apologies. I withdraw that. No, so what we the opportunity at Steep Head is we can have a short outfall. It's only 500 metres long, so it's comparatively cheaper to build, and we end up at 19 metres water depth. So we'll get fantastic dilution dispersion. We'll get a minimum of 200 to 1 dilutions within 100 metres, which will be very, very good. There are some risks, and there's all sorts of complexities, because clearly that's a Mataitai reserve. There's obviously food gathering, fishing, and crayfish taking a whole lot of other stuff going on out there. And so on the face of it, it doesn't look like a great place to put an outfall, taking into account all the values and the various different users. So that, as Russell said at the start, we've just come in as engineers and plonked down some lines on a map, which is very, very superficial. But there it is for you to have a look at. The public health impacts will be low, and the environmental impacts will be low, because the dilution will be very, very good. We also get the benefit of the simple treatment upgrade, where we're just bolting on the UV disinfection. Total cost 235 million as an average of the pipe routes.
Asking it, I should be obvious, but because of the signs on it, where's Maui in that map? Where does that
the green dot.
Is that just to the south of Maui?
It's sort of the west of Maui.
2 lines intersect.
It's the west of Maui, directly west.
Yeah, it runs right out to the head.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I
around
know
shoreline.
that none of these options would be loved by mana whenua. I would caution against this one the most, especially given the Mataitai and the native reserve that sits over the back there. Obviously, a lot of the Mataitais that have been gone for so far have been successfully granted, and the whānau at Maui are very well embedded. So I would caution against this one the most. And obviously there's a lot of kaimoana behind there. I go and get my power from there.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments on that one? Okay, so next slide, or we're just about finished?
So you're on the summary sheet.
Yeah, so we've had this in front of us, so I think we can just probably go straight to questions. I can understand it pretty well, so I'm sure everyone else does. So we'll go Tom and then Lee.
So I'm trying to understand what level of accuracy this has been done to so far. Are we talking about sort of concept stage, or pre-feasibility, or full feasibility?
Yeah, it's what we call Class 4 standard, which is concept level design, which is plus 50 minus 30.
Right, because I mean, I was looking at the P&G engineering and contingency, which is about 40% of the cost, which is eye-watering, right? So there's a huge uncertainty premium, built into the estimates that are there, and if you, reduce them to what you would normally look at, you're looking at, maybe 170 and 180, it's a significant difference. So, I mean, my question would be, how quickly can we get to a point where we're able to start to put numbers with more confidence on? Because as long as we're adding, nearly $100 million to the cost just for uncertainty. Well, not only just, I mean, obviously it's engineering and P&G, but they should not be 93 or 95 million.
Yeah, I'll check to Patricia for that one.
For the purposes of the long-term plan, we need to have something sooner rather than later. So it's using the best information that we have at the time, noting that we could be, what was it, plus 50, minus 30? I like that one. I might start making the guys use that rather than plus or minus 50. So never minus. But we just need to go with something. If those that were around for the last LTP will recall, we were adding these in at the very last minute, which caused us significant problems with the auditors because they need the justification, the work which Becca have done, give us that support. So put us in a best position that we can be with the auditors. But we would probably do some stress testing on these numbers to show what it would look like if it wasn't at a plus 50 and it was a minus. It was slightly lower. So we know that it'll move. But that's the same for any of the big projects that we put through into the LTP. They will move, they can move significantly.
So just so I understand what you're using at the moment, so is a contingency built into that, what, 30% or something? Is it 30?
30.
30, okay.
Contingency is 30.
Thank you. Which is consistent with the level of engineering that's been done so far. It's just that it bumps up the number enormously when you put them in.
Yeah, sorry, Greg, I wasn't here when you did the original land disposal one. I don't want to relitigate, but just a silly question. If you were to go north, and the options that you looked at, that was just available land?
Well, we weren't too concerned about available land. We didn't look at land ownership. What we looked at is a large contiguous area where we can irrigate all the wastewater in one zone or in maybe a couple of zones that are close together. We must have that because if it's discrete little bits, 5 and 10 hectares here, there and everywhere, it just won't be economic because of the reticulation, the pipeline costs will be huge.
Yeah, that's where
And the other factor is as we get further away, we have to pump water a long, long way. So we need bigger pipelines and the running costs become enormous. So, naturally we're kind of closing in and we use a number like 20 kilometres radius around Invercargill.
Yeah, I mean, I'd sort of made, that's where I got to as well. I just sort of wondered, layman's looking at whether you went, north or south. If you had it at 50% at Sandy Point and 50% up towards the north, is that a feasible thing to investigate? But that adds the dual pipeline issue, of course. But I'm just sort of thinking, what do you need to get it down to at Sandy Point, and what's adjacent to Sandy Point that we could acquire if it's much cheaper to do land disposal and it meets everyone's,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot of, this is just a starting point on a pretty long journey around, exploration, optioneering, and all sorts of facets, not only engineering, but, chemical makeup, treatment, all those sorts of things. So,
may I share if, given there are 4 options up there, and given the comment about the difficulty with steep head, I wonder if, and it may be there is no answer to this, but I just wonder whether there actually is a view by Mana Whenua amongst the remaining 3, which one would be preferable?
Possibly not. Yeah, I mean, you've just received this information like we have, so they would probably need to come back to.
That's fair enough, but it just means as
Yeah,
long as you're doing engineering in parallel,
Yeah,
3 of them,
so they're a
that's a lot
stakeholder.
of money.
So, they'll work alongside us, with us, and provide that insight as we move through the process.
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the start, I would want to request that the council ask for a commission of CIA.
Yeah.
That'll give it, but I think that also needs to be considered closer to the optioneering stage, because it's my understanding that we're a year off. We're quite a fair distance from it, but prior to that, what Councillor Broad suggested earlier about having a meeting between Mana Whenua, representation, and council, I think, to get a clear understanding of it, I think that's a really good place to start.
Well, the Water Committee firstly, yeah, cool. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I think that's the end of that. Yeah, so thanks Greg and Katie for joining us and for your knowledge and expertise and insights. So appreciate that. It is going to be a journey, so we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Alternative water. Do we want to have a 5-minute break? Yeah. Yeah, just quickly have, say, 2-minute break and then we'll come back.
Tim's out.
We can do it in that time.
Good man. I knew you
It's
were
a
guiding.
one slide show, so.
That's the right attitude. Get it done.
Love it.
So did you just want to wait a minute or just kick on?
Just kick on. Okay, let's go for it.
The alternate water project, the decision was made by Council in August 2025 to proceed with option 2, which was to proceed with an adaptive consent application or adaptive management consent application, put in the necessary well infrastructure so we could continue monitoring the aquifer performance or capacity and also understand the environmental effects better. At which point in which we had enough data to make enough data to support our understanding of the aquifer performance, then we would come back to council for approvals and what budgets would be required to develop the capacity further. So currently, we're forecasting a capital investment of $4.4 million. I think it's also just important to cover off the fact that this bit of work we're doing now is part of the phase 1 development of the field, and that the objectives of that was to secure an emergency water supply, which is at the moment projected to be 5 million litres a day, and that can be treated or untreated, as well as secure a minimum and continuous 3 million litres of draw a day, which would be treated. Any questions?
Keep rolling.
Okay.
That's it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
No questions? No? Okay. Right. Well done. You're well into your 10
Ahead of
minutes.
time now.
Yeah. Okay, who's next? Relation Watermat, you've got 5 minutes. No. Sorry.
Bruce, our Chair, this should be fairly straightforward, so could potentially stick to that challenge, pun intended. So from a reticulation extension perspective, what we wanted to promote to the committee was, we're seeing growth within the city is occurring in the northern part of the city, northern end of Invercargill. So that's an area where we're beginning to understand a bit more detail of a hydraulic perspective with hydraulic modelling for supply and demand. And likewise to the south of the network, for us to have those provisions in place to actually model and understand demand in detail. This goes side by side with water metering facet that I'll cover off on the next slide. The intent for us to understand in more detail around demand across our trunk mains within our reticulation across the network, primarily of a water reticulation perspective, gives us the ability to make really intelligent decisions about what's happening where and understanding what's happening where as far as zones goes, demand zones. So I'll just leave it there for now and happy to take any questions.
Matt, one just process thing that might be worth noting is that essentially that rephasing is keeping it in the holding pattern of being in year 11. So essentially reflecting that the full assessment work Matt's talking about needs to be kind of completed before that greater certainty of being in the first 10 years of the plan.
So what are we saying here? So reticulation extension, 50% water, 50% sewage. So to where?
So we're
or to all those communities that are listed here.
So those communities have been highlighted within the LTP to date.
Right.
So
you would you get 50% coverage to those. That
is correct.
The aggregate of those communities.
Correct.
Right. Mayor Campbell?
That's what's assumed about what would be paid by the homeowner themselves. I mean, given when the sewage was extended to Otachara, and I was living there at the time. It cost me a lot of money, right, to do it. I mean, are we assuming that, is that $50 million or 43.5? Is that assuming that council pays for all of it, or does it assume a contribution from
Question.
homeowners?
Good question. I would pass that through.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. Look, the cost to council was being indicated as the cost of the actual project itself. The funding associated to that, historically we have gone through, and those getting access to it, we've done funding arrangements in relation to it. So yeah, if we're extending a network into a new subdivision or an existing subdivision, we normally would do that. We've already done it in the past. I think of Kennington, where we've done it as well. You have to look at who's getting the benefit associated to it. So we'd work through that depending on the different extensions proposed, and do it from a funding side. But the cost indication up there is we still have to pay for the full cost. It's how we recover it.
So we would effectively do it and then rate them on a targeted rate basis for the capital cost of it, or some way like that.
There's different mechanisms, but
Yeah.
yes, targeted rate can be one of those.
So what sort of level of asking them if they want it is there in this?
Speak to that if you want. So hence this is another reason for moving it back out to year 11, because it this is another reason to move it out to year 11, is that we need to have those conversations with the community in terms of we haven't yet tested what the demand is. We also would need to test obviously the rating policy and the fees and charges around the element of funding requirements. It's not proposed that we're at the stage yet, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but that we're not really ready to do that yet for this plan, and hence the recommendation to just rephase this out so that we would be ready for the next plan with that information.
So next long-term plan.
Well, by then, next water service strategy, water service delivery plan, because remember, we are doing both things in parallel. We need to get out of the habit eventually of saying long-term plan. Yep.
May I ask then, because my second question was going to be the same one that you just asked actually, Chair, but given that whether we include this in the next long-term plan or not, really ideally by that time we would want to, I think, have done some consultation. I know that normally we do it the other way around, but I think in advance of that we really would want to know what the appetite of those areas are to have that, and that means that we would need to have we'd need to have formed a view about what the share of what share of cost is gonna go, whether it's going to be charged to them or 50%, or it's going to be smoothed across everybody in the, But I guess the point I was making is that I don't think you want to arrive in 3 years' time at this stage, the next long-term plan, and start talking then about consultation. It just seems to me to be too late.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I would certainly recommend doing early engagement. And I'll just note that we will be looking at this from the assumptions anyway in terms of what's going into the revenue model. And I know that Patricia and Jamie have started to talk about that already. So we will have further kind of discussions all around the funding scenarios in August. Yep.
Also, there's probably a bit of work for the Water Committee to do at some stage next year or two, just around that. So, yeah. Okay, Michael.
Probably a good time to highlight in relation to some of this with the changing standards, then it may not be a choice factor in relation to some of this around scale and size of some of those communities may not have the choice of being on their own schemes, so there's a cost impact in relation to that. Just highlighting that potentially will impact on the community, and we'd be working through how to actually work through that with the community so it's the lowest cost impact for them going forward in relation to it as well, at the same time as trying to meet the standards for them from perspective of their individuals. Noting it's not, it wouldn't be council trying to impose or force that on them. It is a case where the standards are actually indicating they can't have their current supply, and we have to provide it, and we need to work through how to do that as lowest cost impact to those homeowners. So that's a challenge down the track, and it is a big challenge we're very mindful of, and as our rural and residential areas start to grow or in capacity side of it.
That's under Te Mara Arawai's, Briggs. Yeah.
Sorry, just to add to that, Grant, the other water entities are all pushing Te Mara Arawai, and it's not clear at the moment around point of entry and different solutions. So, you know, it may be that this extension becomes something potentially different in the next 4 or 5 years, depending on the standards. Yeah.
Good.
Through yourself, Chair, just to support the member's comment, that is correct. We're in consultation with Te Mara Arawai around interpretation of self-suppliers, and some areas there where we've seen some ambiguity, and that we would see a great benefit to connected consumers or our ratepayers in general. So, yep.
Cool. Next, water meters, not water tower.
So 3 South, Chair, again this does go consecutively around our previous discussion point. The intent around water meters is during this initial point of time is to allow the team to obtain, Russell's team to obtain some real intelligence around our key distribution mains within the network, and in regards to zones of where we're seeing demand. We envision that to just be part of standard business on how we operate moving forward, and then obviously to provide a really detailed platform for analytics of when we're making decisions around growth and demand, exactly what we're dealing with. It's not assumed.
Thank you.
Ask how the estimate has doubled in 3 years.
Get me with a mouthful of food. I believe the estimate was was very high level when we did it 3 years ago. I'm looking at Rhiannon. I'm not sure we had a huge amount of support behind that. It was
It was one that went in between the long-term plan and the next annual plan as an estimate. So yes, it was at very high level and needs now to be firmed up.
And then
So can I ask what level of
Firming up.
engineering has been done to get it to 20 million? And one context I'll give us, when we put smart meters right through the city, it was 10 million.
This is for PANET. That's for PANET. Smart
That was
meters.
for PureNet. We put them right through the city. 20 million seems a lot. So, I mean, it may be right. I'm just asking what level engineering has been done. Is that, is that the number of houses times a known cost per house, or?
Correct. Yes.
So it's just high level of confidence about the numbers.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, my question might be an easy one to answer, but what was our thinking around timing? Given that, we know that water loss and data is a real fundamental platform of the
So
entity.
we've already started their workflow.
Have we?
So their workflow is underway. I guess there's a piece around the wider intent around what happens with water distribution in general across the network. That's something that we need to understand, I guess, the appetite of elected members, the appetite of our community, and also our obligations as a water service entity to TA. So, that is all going hand in hand as we go through this timeline. So,
There's also a link to our Bank Clifton piece in my head, because, one of the impacts of cost on that was the volume of water we have to deal with, right? So if we don't have any idea of the water in our network, which then we can deduct, well, what's the infiltration, if we know what water's in our network. So, to me, this is a pretty important piece of work that we need to get done as soon as practical, because it helps us inform about a lot of other pieces of water.
Yeah, they're slightly different. There's I&I, which is in infiltration into the stormwater sewage network, and then there's use of water, high pressurised water. So there's sort of a link, but they're a little bit mutually exclusive, aren't they, Matt? Would that be fair? Yeah.
Most
It's
of the
more
water
about
used
the
would end
data.
up in the wastewater system, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, true.
So,
So it's water use,
if we, through South Chair, if we had a break in, say, Zone 6, and Zone 6 was assumed to have a known flow quantity of X, and it's now Y, we would have the intelligence to mobilise and investigate quickly on the pretense that that would be essentially I into our drainage system.
Your point, yeah.
You should ask, but to be able to do that, would you actually need meters on every household? Surely you just need it at street level.
The initial intent at the moment, through the chair, is via our own main distribution, so our trunk mains, our large pipes.
And is that part of this project, or that's something we've got on this slate to do pretty soon, isn't it?
Soon.
Yeah.
Yep, it's starting soon. It's starting next financial year.
Yeah. So we're starting to build out the capability of our network. Yeah, cool. Okay, any other questions? Righto. What do we got now? Network capacity for at Bluff. So this is around, this is drinking water? Yeah.
It is, yep.
Yeah.
So through South Chair, just in support with Russell, very similar discussion. The narrative is very similar to what we've just been discussing around metering. Again, we understand that there is some desire to develop and grow in that area of the network to the south side of the city. We need to undertake some modelling in that space at a more molecular detail, but we also need to understand what demand looks like from any respective area of growth, whether it be a business or a community. So we're working through that behind the scenes as well, in order to, are we talking a secondary pipeline to Bluff, or are we talking about increasing pumping capacity on our current line? They are very separate outcomes.
So with this, does this costing take into account some of the development that's been talked about at Aroa? Or is that different again?
That is different again.
So what's the capacity lift in Bluff associated to? Is it aquaculture, or it is aquaculture primarily? Okay. And so the phasing of the proposed year, that aligns with the current slated plan for the aquaculture strategy?
Correct.
It does.
And we also have our existing commercial consumers on that part of the network that we, it's critical that we continue to supply continuity of flow to those respective businesses. So that's non-negotiable in our eyes, as well as taking on potentially new ventures. So that's what this sort of relates to.
Tammy, you've been involved in that planning with the aquaculture to a reasonably high level, detailed level. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
So does that the timeline that you're applying to that development fits in with what we're saying here around the infrastructure for that industry?
I'm not involved in that, but that is a question that I can take back and ask.
Just to check, make sure it's absolutely phasing.
So I think it's worth noting we're having regular discussions with like Beyond 2025, and those discussions going on into the regional spatial strategy. We had some in-depth analysis of potential water requirements relating to the aquaculture strategy, and we have no further update on that since that was done a year ago. The level of uncertainty is still high. So what we would say is, at this point, you've got the project in the plan. If some more information came to light sooner than expected, this project could be moved forward, noting the challenges there would be in that detailed design stage, because it is so uncertain at the moment. But at this point, what we're hearing is the best approach is to bring that new information into the regional spatial planning process, and then next LTP is when we're hoping we'll then next water service strategy, water service delivery plan. We're expecting then that's when that greater certainty would come. But at this point, there's still too much uncertainty about potable, non-potable, production versus processing.
Ask this from a position of basically no knowledge, so apologies if it's a silly question, but I have been asked it by someone who lives in Bluff who used to be a water engineer for us, and that was, is there any reason why we are not considering bringing back into operation the old water plant at Bluff? Because there already is one, and it's unused.
Through the chair, that plant has been decommissioned and demolished. We removed it because it was a structural earthquake-prone building, and we've removed it. There were some treatment devices there, but they're unsuitable for today's conditions.
Cool. Righto. That's us. So what have we got next? Water tower.
South Chair, Russell and I will take this too. So the water tower is a project that was is earmarked to occur by way of potentially looking at relocating the operational aspect of the tower towards ground level at Doon Street by way of a newly installed pressure vessel that would provide an allowance for the water tower to operate to live the rest of its days as a fully fledged heritage building to the city, as opposed to an operational heritage building. The works entailed to get into that position is obviously the purchase of the pressure vessel itself, but also understanding our risk profile from a standard, our earthquake standards, MBS. So, and where it sits against the building structure. So I'll just welcome Chris to the table. So it's perfect timing, Chris.
Chris is here as a heritage spokesperson.
Chris is here just in regards to this table slide for the water tower. So happy to take questions around this. So,
given what we've talked about so far and the, frankly, eye-watering amounts of money that, we're talking about with huge impact on rates, frankly. I noticed that this project is for level of service improvement, but there's nothing really in the list that I would have thought would have been proven service. So, I mean, my fundamental question is this a project that has to be done, given the context that we have of so many other things that actually do have to be done? Is it a nice to have?
Through the chair, this project is actually strengthening the tower and the buildings to be compliant with earthquake standards. It's not to do with the water network as such, because we only use the water tower to maintain pressure for the time it takes for us to start our generator when we have a power outage. And that's why we've got, in the next couple of slides, a value to put in a pressure vessel, which would do the same thing and then revert the water tower back to a heritage building. So it wouldn't need to be part of our water network.
So I mean, again, can I ask the question, or is it essential?
Not if we have a pressure vessel installed.
So we either have to upgrade the water tower or to do the vessel.
Through the chair, I think that the mayor's question is this absolutely required? I think from an operational nature, Mayor Tom, there's concerns around access into that location. Should it be required by our mechanical and maintenance staff? It's a no-go zone at the moment, so we compromise on what we can access within that location of our operational network, being the head of the tower. So.
I wonder if it's just worth the building, just getting an input from Chris, because obviously the question is, once it becomes not part of the water network, is it essential to do? And essentially it's about, well, the community values it as a heritage building, but becomes less essential for the network. in terms of the structure itself, Chris, is there any update you can give around the earthquake strengthening aspect?
Kia ora, and to answer your question, Mayor Campbell, as part of the water network, if the pressure vessel was built outside of this, then no, it's not required. As a building, it's only listed as 25% against our earthquake strengthening, so it's tagged as an earthquake-prone building, and as a Category 1 heritage asset under Pouhuritonga Act, we would either need to upgrade it or remove it. There is a current bill in front of government around reassessing the priority of those earthquake-prone structures, but as it stands today, it would either be an upgrade or a removal.
If we were to kick on with what's planned and retain it with, sorry about the whatever at the top, or using that as the generator if we need to get our generators online. Obviously the strengthening works would occur at the same time, so you get dual purpose, I suppose. What's the, aside from access, is there any other argument as to why we wouldn't operational and probably doesn't have to come online altogether too often, rather than, I guess, leaving it as a standalone? And is there any other reason other than access? Because I don't know if that's it's me.
Tricia, do you want to have say?
I just want to remind councillors and those around the table that this is already budgeted for. We've been pushing this one out since the 2021-31 long-term plan, and depending on whether decisions about whether it's a pressure vessel or not may impact what's required to do to strengthen it as well. So
Yeah, so I think we look at the next slide because I think we're going to see what the pressure vessel costs if we...
Oh, what I was going to ask, sorry, just before we do get that, is does that number change then if we don't have to do any remediation to how it operates as a pressure vessel?
So I checked in with Becca in the last couple of weeks on that. So if we empty the water from this tower, then yep, we will revisit the engineering designs associated with that.
So it has the potential to be significantly cheaper than the 5.4 that we've already rated for.
Potentially, but not sure.
Let's see the next slide because that's the water vessel, is it?
No, I think it's the last slide.
It's the Dune Street pressure tank, right, Russell? Yeah.
Correct, yep.
So it's $500,000 to get the pressure vessel in there to remove the functional need for the water tower.
Exactly, yep.
And then that could, to Alex's point, could decrease potentially the cost of earthquake strengthening.
Possibly, but remembering that the longer you leave things, the dearer it becomes. That's the only thing that we've seen historically, is that prices do go up, but yes, you're absolutely correct, it could come down.
Just to jump in here for a moment, through South Chair, I think there are two aspects going on here. One was a diversion of the operational nature of the tower, going to a ground-mounted pressure vessel configuration for $500,000, okay? The second aspect to the tower is, okay, you remove that column of water from the top of the tower, what structural effects does that present to the tower, if any, in regards to its current MBS standards? Yeah. And the engineering advice that we've had around this is absolutely minimal. There is minimal effect, which is good news for us in regards to cost. So I think to answer the question from Mayor Tom around, is the optionality and cost reducing in regards to the water tower? The answer would be yes in my eyes, based on the advice that we've had regarding the diversion of water from the head of the tower to the vessel.
So in that case, I would want to see the updated earthquake strengthening. it's a fundamental, like, God, hate to knock that thing down. Imagine the public outcry, and it's also
Yeah, like, this is the bright light of today. There could be a way we can reduce our spend.
hey, wonderful.
Don't want to miss that.
Funnily enough, it's a tower. It's a
Yeah.
lighthouse.
Tom?
I mean, it's a slightly broader comment that, you know, this discussion brings up the question of who actually does the ranking, because it's clear that we cannot do everything. I mean, you know, it's absolutely clear, right? If you look at the chart that we saw before, that Patricia showed us, or not Patricia showed us, but commented on, that showed, you know, capital requirements are well over 100 million for a number of years where we don't have the facility to do it. So somebody's got to do the ranking. And either that ranking is going to be done by council, which is what we're doing and discussing it, or whether it's done by staff before they bring it. But the trouble when you approve things consecutively is that nothing gets brought to the table. It's not a good idea. Everything's a good idea. Is that important, right?
Yeah.
So as you approve them consecutively, what you find is you end up with a number that's impossible.
Yeah,
So how do you do the ranking, and who does it? That's my question.
So I'll go to Michael, and you can have a crack at that too, man, if you want.
So what is going to be the process is that staff will have already ranked and prioritised, and then while we're bringing things to you sequentially, there is an opportunity to come back round once we've pulled it all together to go, actually, we need to make some changes. And as we start pulling things together, as we go through activity plans as well, we're doing the same thing internally, going, oh, I see a bottleneck or something where we have to look at reprioritising aspects or moving things out a year or those aspects. So we are doing that, but it's easier to do it this way than to bring you everything in, 3, 4, 5 days of constant workshop. Yeah. And in relation to water, it's done in relation to the water service delivery plan. So we've already got an approved plan that we need to follow.
That was going to be my plan. I know this is LTP, but we're going to have another shot at it with the water service delivery plan and the strategy. So because we're going to have to prioritise it.
Michael?
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, I'll hear from Michael and then come to you.
Through yourself, Chair. Look, we are in a very difficult and challenging position. As staff, I need to make sure that they're providing an open, transparent position to what is in the program for the council. Absolutely, we're using the council's direction in relation to the prioritisation across the whole program. The water services plan puts another layer over the top in relation to what we're required to put into there, and the impact of that overlay in relation to the LTP. Working through some of that, we're having to look at timings in relation to some of the works from a staffing point of view to say, well, what's actually deliverable. We might have said in the water services plan we need to do it, but we actually now need to look at, well, with laying over the rest of the program, we actually need to shift and rebalance some of that. What is the timeframes in relation to that? We know it has to happen, but when can we actually fit it into the program? Where that's the challenge we're at the moment. We've done the initial prioritisation. Now we're having to look back and go, well, there's still things we need to balance and realign because we're not quite there yet in relation to the program. But rest assured, we are using what Council's given us as a steer across the whole program and bringing back that component. The challenge we've got is also trying to leave that ability to do some of those community projects that the council still want to do as an extra layer. So we just need to make sure we're balancing all those components up. So rest assured we are doing it in the background, trying to do that, but we're also having an open, transparent process from a public perspective.
Just one further point from a process perspective. Like, obviously council itself has started some of the prioritisation in that community project space, and we will continue that next week, which is is why for some of these core projects we need to have a good idea of what is needed for water in order to make that process more meaningful next week. But it is the start of a process running now over the remainder of this year through till November. Every LTP, that November workshop for budgeting stuff is still needing to come out then, and that's where the scoring will assist as well with council decision making at that last point, and then through to consultation. And just noting from the process point around the water service delivery plan and the changes to that, that's where the DIA are advising us to do it in parallel, and then we update them when we're making changes. So changes made through the annual plan, for example, will be updated to the DIA already. Yep.
So just to get it clear, so we would go, the Water Services Committee would sort of come up with their preferred list of phasing.
Absolutely, there will be papers that will come to the committee, but essentially through the timing of the workshops, we will take what we've got here as the starting position for that workshop next week, to show then when you think about the options around projects that are essentially level of service discussions. And I would see perhaps we are bringing the water tower through in that conversation. Matt, be guided by you, but essentially it looks like you can separate the water network off if you wish at a fairly low cost, and then the decision around the building becomes a community heritage asset discussion. So there's no doubt there's a lot of challenging conversations to go in that space.
Give me one more. I mean, to me, it's essential though that, in terms of ranking, that staff have had a go at that before it comes to council. I don't see how, council or the water committee, for that matter, could make a ranking between the Preston Stormwater Rising Main and the Rising Main duplication process. I mean, we just don't have the technical knowledge. So, given there are limits on what I don't want to see is council making decisions on the basis of no knowledge about but if we're forced to rank them, then that's what will happen. So,
So just to speak to that, Chair, absolutely. So everything that's listed as a required legal item, ELT is basically recommending this needs to go into the plan, and that's the position that has been taken. And then everything that is a level of service optionality item, those are the items we would seek further council feedback on. But as Patricia says, there's still rephasing and other items that the ELT will need to do as part of the process and continue working with council on through the remainder of the period. But that is how we have tried to enable and support that council decision-making process.
Sorry, keep it going because it's important. Even though we already estimate that we've got a engineering capacity to do about $80 million worth of stuff a year, and we've actually talking about 100 million. So if you bring $100 million worth of projects to council because ELT have said that these are the things that must be done, who decides what 20 million is not done? And I don't think council should decide. I'm not suggesting council should decide. I'm just talking about the priority, the ranking and.
Through yourself, Chair, our target is providing that professional advice back is to actually bring you back something that's in that range of around the 80 to 85 as staff. We're hoping to have a position where there is that the community optional component or the optional projects across the all of the projects of around that 5 million in relation to what we think is capacity side, noting that we're trying to grow. Some of those projects that we're looking at will bring other players into the market, and we're looking at those and going, well, they're the ones that we think we need to target as on and above, and if they don't happen in those years, then they will shift out because we can't get the industry down. But we're looking at the ones that are based on the existing industry at the same time. So it's a real challenge in that space, but we're trying to get that position for council. So when you are looking at prioritisation component, you are looking at items, literally you can actually prioritise and make a call.
Okay. All good. Righto. What's next?
Well, we've touched on, I guess, some of these other projects. Sorry, just back a slide. We've sort of touched on some of those other pressing projects. I won't go through them. You can see the slide deck. But if there are no questions on that, we'll go through to next steps.
So all those projects are in the operational plan though, right, and part of the water service delivery, so they're business as usual stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rhiannon, would you like to discuss next steps?
Well, I think we've touched on this to a certain extent anyway. So obviously next week there will be the strategic projects workshop on all the remaining items that are non-waters related. There will be a paper following this workshop to the Water Committee, as you've said, Chair, where you will be able to confirm this as an interim position, recognising that everything remains interim until we land on a final budget at the end of the year, and then we move into audit and then consultation, so changes still happen all the way through that process. So there's time for new information to become available and to be absorbed to a certain point and level of certainty. So that might be around Clifton, for example, as the team further shape up those options and yourself as governance consider them in more detail, and or other projects that we've discussed today. But at a certain point, obviously, we have to land a position for the budget.
Any final words from anyone? Well, look, thanks, Matt, to your team and also to Rhiannon and the staff for putting this together. It's been a really valuable session and well constructed as well. So thanks very much for the efforts there. Thanks to anyone who's joined online. Obviously, this is just critical community stuff, so it's really important that people do engage in this process with us. And thanks for coming along today to our guests. Good to see you. And yeah, so next steps, paper to Water Committee, and then we'll work through the LTP process. Great, well done. Thank you, team. Cheers.